Today, XRP continues to surge after reaching its highest level since 2018. And Vance Spencer of Framework Ventures discusses the fate of Web3 startups under President-elect Donald Trump. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Brandon Gomez. Crypto markets mostly in the red this morning. As of noon Eastern, Bitcoin lost 1% and was trading at $96,200. The cryptocurrency has held a tight range in the mid to upper $90,000 level since the eve of Thanksgiving, as investors eye that $100,000 threshold. Ether fell nearly 2.75% to $3,600, and XRP jumped 43% to $2.74 after surging through the weekend, reaching its highest level in years after Fox Business reported Friday that Ripple is close to getting a new stablecoin greenlit by a top crypto regulator. The rally, though, first kicked off soon after US Election Day, when the industry began to anticipate more favorable crypto regulation. Also looking for a moment at crypto-focused stocks, shares of MicroStrategy fell around 0.7% as of noon, after the company announced it added 15,400 more Bitcoin to its holdings for around $1.5 billion. Meanwhile, Mara Holdings dropped 6% after it announced its plans to offer $700 million in convertible senior notes due 2031 to qualified buyers. It plans to use proceeds to repurchase existing convertible notes due 2026, as well as to acquire more Bitcoin. All right, jumping into our main story, Crypto World's Tanea McKeel recently spoke with Vance Spencer, co-founder of Framework Ventures, about his expectations for the crypto startup space under the next administration and what kinds of projects he believes will thrive the most.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So as someone with a billion-dollar crypto venture fund, I think you're the right person to ask what Trump's victory means for the crypto venture capital space. We're talking about potential for clear regulations or looser regulations. So what does that look like for the VC space?
It looks good. I mean, I'm looking at the chart of Bitcoin. It's at 94,000. So I think the industry is feeling pretty good, and the legislation and the regulation is set to follow. I think that's a Q1 thing of next year. But overall, we expect the atmosphere to be more favorable to crypto startups.
What kind of startups are you expecting to excel come 2025? Are there areas that were left by the wayside after the peak in 21 that could see a comeback, or is it still about infrastructure and tokenization?
I think it's more about use cases now. I mean, literally every successful crypto product, is being sued by the government at this point. And so really it can only get better. And I expect the people who will benefit the most from this will be DeFi protocols and people who are trying to connect the traditional financial system to the on-chain financial system. And people forget, but there's $200 billion of stablecoins on-chain, and that'll probably hit $1 trillion this cycle. And that means that Tether will be one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And a lot of the financial services that are built around that and on-chain in general will be huge beneficiaries of that move. So I think generally rising tide lifts all boats, games, DeFi, energy, really any sort of on-chain idea will have a better shot. But there's so many that are on the edge of just institutional acceptance and that have real revenue and earnings that are going to do really well. And that's the DeFi sector.
Let's also talk about markets long term. Bitcoin's gotten a lot of attention since it's been hitting all-time highs. What about Ether? It's suffered a little bit of like middle child syndrome this year, I think. Really kind of stagnant for the few months from say July with the launch of the ETH ETFs, and then a nice rally back to those summer highs right after the election. So I know that there were some concerns earlier. The narrative was a little bit more difficult, ironically, for investors to wrap their heads around. The idea of ultrasound money had sort of gotten out the window. So are there still questions about its use cases, and where does it go from here? What's next?
So ETH is on track to do between 3 and 5 bill of earnings this year, and that's at zero inflation. So like you think about the ultrasound money, idea, narrative, meme, whatever you want to call it, that's very much intact. It is the most profitable blockchain asset at scale that we have today. And really what's happening with Ethereum is they have an L2 based roadmap. So they have basically an ecosystem of ecosystems that are all effectively reselling ETH. They're building applications on top of ETH. And Ethereum is starting to realize that value in the form of ETH being burned. And really, if you look at the fees today versus August, that was the low for fees for ETH, it's about 30x higher. And so, like Bitcoin running first, running hardest, that's pretty much like standard bull market fare. And, at this point in 2020, Michael Saylor was on the scene. He was talking about, S&P 500 companies adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. The whole run was going to be about Bitcoin. 3 months later, ETH has tripled against Bitcoin, and all the alts and all the different apps have really taken off.
One of the other reasons that ETH had lost a little bit of its luster this year was the popularity in Solana. Where do you see that going over the next year, and how do you see it measuring up next to ETH?
So, we have exposure to all ecosystems, Bitcoin, ETH, Solana. And I think what's been surprising about Solana is just the growth of fees around meme coins. And, that's probably not the most institutional thing that you could talk about on CNBC, but you need to have a view on meme coins to be bullish on Solana, because that is 95% of the activity there. And so to the extent that persists, Solana is going to keep chugging along, keep doing fees. People are going to be excited about it. If it stops, that obviously might reverse. But I think what you're going to see this cycle, and maybe this is a prediction for 2025, is that the new L1s, there was Avalanche, there was, I guess Luna now, it's gone. There's Polkadot, all these other L1s that launched in 2020 did very, very well against both Solana and ETH. Who's going to be that, coin of this cycle? We think it's going to be Berachain or probably Monad. Those are the two that people think about. And so it's all about the risk curve and where you are on it and, how far out you want to go. But for us, we want a piece of each, and we want to have that, that L1 that defines the cycle. And we think that's, still hasn't been released yet.
Bringing it back to Bitcoin, where are we in that market cycle broadly? Trump feels like a huge catalyst, but there's also the macro aspect to it. So are there any headwinds that you're watching for in 2025?
Macro headwinds, not as much. There's obviously unexpected things that can happen. I think interest rates coming down, ETFs ramping flows, and just MicroStrategy in the market today was trading more than NVIDIA, hours before its earnings. And when does that stop? When does it slow? MicroStrategy's 3x above its NAV, probably at some point in the near future, but who knows? I think the prognosis for all these crypto assets is, remarkably positive. And, for us, we're not, probably buying Bitcoin at, 94,000, but we're not selling it either. We have a very, very long-term view on it. And I think we have that for the rest of our assets as well. But, I think what we've yet to see is the legislation that comes out of the Trump administration. And if there's a path towards, basically legalizing digital assets, that's the case for another 100x growth in this space. And I think that is going to come. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today. We're back again tomorrow. We'll see you then.